Chapter 14. Florinda. La Gorda and I were in total agreement that by the time Zuleika had taught us the intricacies of dreaming, we had accepted the undeniable fact that the rule is a map, that there is another awareness concealed in us, and that it is possible to enter into that awareness. Don Juan had accomplished what the rule prescribed. The rule determined that his next movement was to introduce me to Florinda, the only one of his warriors whom I had not met. Don Juan had told me that I had to go to her house by myself, because whatever transpired between Florinda and myself was of no concern to others. He said that Florinda was to be my personal guide, exactly as if I were a Nahual like him. He had had that kind of relationship with the warrior of his benefactor's party, who was comparable to Florinda. Don Juan left me one day at the door of Nelida's house. He told me to walk in, that Florinda was waiting for me inside. "It's an honor to make your acquaintance," I said to the woman who was facing me in the hall. "I'm Florinda," she said. We looked at each other in silence. I was awestruck. My state of awareness was as keen as it had ever been. Never again have I experienced a comparable sensation. "That's a beautiful name," I managed to say, but I meant more than that. The soft and long enunciation of the Spanish vowels made the name fluid and sonorous, especially the I after the R. The name was not rare. I simply had never met anyone until that day who was the essence of that name. The woman in front of me fit into it as if it had been made for her, or perhaps as if she herself had made her person fit into it. Physically, she looked exactly like Nelida, except that she seemed more self-confident, more powerful. She had the olive skin of Mediterranean people, Spanish or perhaps French. She was old, and yet she was not feeble or even aged. Her body seemed to be supple and lean. Long legs, angular features, small mouth, a beautifully chiseled nose, dark eyes, and braided white hair. No jowls, no sagging skin on her face and neck. She was old as if she had been made up to look old. Remembering in retrospect my first meeting with her, I am reminded of something thoroughly unrelated but apropos. I saw once in a weekly newspaper a reprint of a 20-year-old photograph of a then young Hollywood actress who had been made up to look 20 years older in order to play the role of an aging woman. Next to it, the paper had printed a current picture of the same actress as she looked after 20 real years of hard living. Florinda, in my subjective judgment, was like the first picture of the movie actress, a young girl made up to look old. "What do we have here?" she said, pinching me. "You don't look like much. Soft, indulging to the core, no doubt." Her bluntness reminded me of Don Juan's. So did the inner life of her eyes. It had occurred to me looking back at my life with Don Juan, that his eyes were always in repose. One could see no agitation in them. It was not that Don Juan's eyes were beautiful to look at. I have seen gorgeous eyes, but never have I found them to say anything. Florinda's eyes, like Don Juan's, gave me the feeling that they had witnessed all there is to witness. They were calm, but not bland. The excitement had been driven inward and had turned into something I could only describe as inner life. Florinda took me through the living room and out to a roofed patio. We sat on some comfortable, sofa-like chairs. Her eyes seemed to look for something in my face. "Do you know who I am and what I am supposed to do for you?" she asked. I said that all I knew about her and her relation to me was what Don Juan had sketched out. In the course of explaining my position, I called her Doña Florinda. "Don't call me Doña Florinda," she said, with a childish gesture of annoyance and embarrassment. "I'm not that old yet, or even that respectable." I asked her how she expected me to address her. "Just Florinda will do," she said. "In so far as to who I am, I can tell you right off that I am a woman warrior who knows the secrets of stalking. And in so far as what I am supposed to do for you, I can tell you that I'm going to teach you the first 7 principles of stalking. The first 3 principles of the rule for stalkers, and the first 3 maneuvers of stalking." She added that the normal thing was for every warrior to forget what transpires when the interaction is on the left side, and that it would take years for me to come to grips with whatever she was going to teach me. She said that her instruction was merely the beginning, and that someday she would finish teaching me, but under different circumstances. I asked her if she minded my asking her questions. "Do as you please," she said. "All I need from you is your commitment to practice. After all, you know in one way or another whatever we're going to discuss. Your shortcomings are that you have no self-confidence and are unwilling to claim your knowledge as power. The Nahual, being a man, mesmerized you. You cannot act on your own. Only a woman can liberate you from that. I will begin by telling you the story of my life, and in doing so, things will become clear to you. I will have to tell it to you in bits, so you will have to come here quite often." Her apparent willingness to tell me about her life struck me as being at odds with the reticence of everyone else to reveal anything personal about themselves. After years with them, I had accepted their ways so unquestioningly that her voluntary intent to reveal her personal life was freakish to me. Her statement put me immediately on guard. "I beg your pardon?" I said. "Did you say that you are going to reveal your personal life to me?" "Why not?" she asked. I answered her with a long explanation of what Don Juan had told me about the encumbering force of personal history and the need that a warrior has to erase it. I wrapped it up by telling her that he had prohibited me from ever talking about my life. She laughed in a high falsetto voice. She seemed to be delighted. That applies only to men, she said. The not doing of your personal life is to tell endless stories, but not a single one about your real self. You see, being a man means that you have a solid history behind you. You have family, friends, acquaintances, and every one of them has a definite idea of you. Being a man means that you're accountable. You cannot disappear that easily. In order to erase yourself, you needed a lot of work. My case is different. I'm a woman, and that gives me a splendid advantage. I'm not accountable. Don't you know that women are not accountable? I don't know what you mean by accountable, I said. I mean that a woman can easily disappear, she replied. A woman can, if nothing else, get married. A woman belongs to the husband. In a family with lots of children, the daughters are discarded very early. No one counts on them, and chances are that some will vanish without leaving a trace. Their disappearance is easily accepted. A son, on the other hand, is something one banks on. It's not that easy for a son to slip off and vanish. And even if he does, he will leave traces behind him. A son feels guilty for disappearing. A daughter does not. When the Nahual trained you to keep your mouth shut about your personal life, he intended to help you to overcome your feeling of having done wrong to your family and friends who were counting on you one way or another. After a lifetime struggle, the male warrior ends up, of course, erasing himself. But that struggle takes its toll on the man. He becomes secretive, forever on guard against himself. A woman doesn't have to contend with that hardship. A woman is already prepared to disintegrate into thin air. In fact, it's expected of her. Being a woman, I'm not compelled to secrecy. I don't give a fig about it. Secrecy is the price you men have to pay for being important to society. The struggle is only for the men because they resent erasing themselves and would find curious ways to pop up somewhere, somehow. Take yourself, for instance. You go around giving lectures. Florinda made me nervous in a very peculiar way. I felt strangely restless in her presence. I would admit without hesitation that Don Juan and Silvio Manuel also made me feel nervous and apprehensive. But it was a different feeling. I was actually afraid of them, especially Silvio Manuel. He terrified me, and yet I had learned to live with my terror. Florinda did not frighten me. My nervousness was rather the result of being annoyed, threatened by her savoir-faire. She did not stare at me the way Don Juan or Silvio Manuel used to. They would always fix their eyes on me until I moved my face away in a gesture of submission. Florinda only glanced at me. Her eyes moved continually from thing to thing. She seemed to examine not only my eyes, but every inch of my face and body. As she talked, she would shift in quick glances from my face to my hands, or to her feet, or to the roof. I make you ill at ease, don't I? She asked. Her question caught me thoroughly off guard. I laughed. Her tone was not threatening at all. "You do," I said. "Oh, it's perfectly understandable," she went on. "You are used to being a man. A woman for you is something made for your benefit. A woman is stupid to you. And the fact that you're a man in the Nawal makes things even more difficult." I felt obligated to defend myself. I thought that she was a very opinionated lady, and I wanted to tell her so. I started off in great form, but petered out almost immediately upon hearing her laughter. It was a joyous, youthful laughter. Don Juan and Don Gennaro used to laugh at me all the time, and their laughter was also youthful. But Florinda's had a different vibration. There was no hurry in her laughter, no pressure. "I think we better go inside," she said. "There shouldn't be any distractions. The Nawal, Juan Matus, has already taken you around, showing you the world. That was important for what he had to tell you. I have other things to talk about, which require another setting." We sat on a leather couch in a den off the patio. I felt more at ease indoors. She went right into the story of her life. She said that she had been born in a fairly large Mexican city to a well-to-do family. As she was an only child, her parents spoiled her from the moment she was born. Without a trace of false modesty, Florinda admitted that she had always been aware of being beautiful. She said that beauty is a demon that breeds and proliferates when admired. She assured me that she could say without the shadow of a doubt that that demon is the hardest one to overcome, and that if I would look around to find those who are beautiful, I would find the most wretched beings imaginable. I did not want to argue with her. Yet, I had the most intense desire to tell her that she was somehow dogmatic. She must have caught my feelings. She winked at me. "They are wretched, you'd better believe it," she continued. "Try them. Be unwilling to go along with their idea that they are beautiful, and because of it, important. You'll see what I mean." She said that she could hardly give her parents or herself full blame for her conceit. Everyone around her had conspired from her infancy to make her feel important and unique. "When I was 15, she went on, "I thought I was about the greatest thing that ever came to earth. Everybody said so, especially men." She confessed that throughout her adolescent years, she indulged in the attention and adulation of scores of admirers. At 18, she judiciously chose the best possible husband from the ranks of no less than 11 serious suitors. She married Celestino, a man of means, 15 years her senior. Florinda described her married life as heaven on earth. To the enormous circle of friends she had already had, she added Celestino's friends. The total effect was that of a perennial holiday. Her bliss, however, lasted only 6 months, which went by almost unnoticed. It all came to a most abrupt and brutal end when she contracted a mysterious and crippling disease. Her left foot, ankle, and calf began to swell. The line of her beautiful leg was ruined. The swelling became so intense that the cutaneous tissues started to blister and burst. Her whole lower leg, from the knee down, became the site of scabs and a pestilent secretion. The skin became hard. The disease was diagnosed as elephantiasis. Doctors' attempts to cure her condition were clumsy and painful, and their final conclusion was that only in Europe were their medical centers advanced enough to possibly undertake a cure. In a matter of 3 months, Florinda's paradise had turned into hell on earth. Desperate and in true agony, she wanted to die rather than go on. Her suffering was so pathetic that one day a servant girl, not being able to bear it any longer, confessed to her that she had been bribed by Celestino's former mistress to slip a certain concoction into her food, a poison manufactured by sorcerers. The servant girl, as an act of contrition, promised to take her to a cure. A woman reported to be the only person who could counteract such a poison. Florinda chuckled, remembering her dilemma. She had been raised a devout Catholic. She did not believe in witchcraft or in Indian cures. But her pain was so intense and her condition so serious that she was willing to try anything. Celestino was deadly opposed. He wanted to turn the servant girl over to the authorities. Florinda interceded, not so much out of compassion, but out of the fear that she might not find the cure on her own. Florinda suddenly stood up. She told me that I had to leave. She held my arm and walked me to the door, as if I had been her oldest and dearest friend. She explained that I was exhausted, because to be in the left side awareness is a special and frail condition which has to be used sparingly. It certainly is not a state of power. The proof was that I had nearly died when Silvio Manuel had tried to rally my second attention by forcing me to enter boldly into it. She said that there is no way on earth that we can order anyone or ourselves to rally knowledge. It is rather a slow affair. The body, at the right time, and under the proper circumstances of impeccability, rallies its knowledge without the intervention of desire. We stood at the front door for a while, exchanging pleasant remarks and trivialities. She suddenly said that the reason the Nahual Juan Matus had brought me to her that day was because he knew that his time on earth was coming to an end. The 2 forms of instruction that I had received, according to Silvio Manuel's master plan, had already been completed. All that was left pending was what she had to say to me. She stressed that hers was not instruction proper, but rather the establishing of my link to her. The next time Don Juan took me to see Florinda, just before he left me at the door, he repeated what she had told me, that the time was approaching for him and his party to enter into the third attention. Before I could question him, he shoved me inside the house. His shove sent me not only into the house, but into my keenest state of awareness. I saw the wall of fog. Florinda was standing in the hall, as if she had been waiting for Don Juan to shove me in. She held my arm and quietly led me to the living room. We sat down. I wanted to start a conversation, but I could not talk. She explained that a shove from an impeccable warrior, like the Nahual Juan Matus, can cause a shift into another area of awareness. She said that my mistake all along had been to believe that the procedures are important. The procedure of shoving a warrior into another state of consciousness is utilizable only if both participants, especially the one who shoves, are impeccable and imbued with personal power. The fact that I was seeing the wall of fog made me feel utterly nervous on a physical level. My body was shaking uncontrollably. Florinda said that my body was shaking because it had learned to crave for activity while it remained in that state of awareness, and that my body could also learn to focus its keenest attention on whatever was being said, rather than whatever was being done. She told me then that to be placed on the left side consciousness was an expediency. By forcing me into a state of heightened awareness and allowing me to interact with his warriors only when I was in that state, the Nahual Juan Matus was making sure that I would have a ledge to stand on. Florinda said that his strategy was to cultivate a small part of the other self by deliberately filling it with memories of interaction. The memories are forgotten only to resurface someday in order to serve as a rational outpost from where to depart into the immeasurable vastness of the other self. Because I was so nervous, she proposed to calm me down by proceeding with the story of her life, which, she clarified, was not really the story of her life as a woman in the world, but the story of how a crummy woman was helped to become a warrior. She said that once she made up her mind to see the cure, there was no way to stop her. She started off, carried on a stretcher by the servant girl and 4 men. On the 2-day trip that changed the course of her life, there were no roads. It was mountainous, and sometimes the men had to carry her on their backs. They arrived at the curer's house at dusk. The place was well lit, and there were lots of people in the house. Florinda said that a polite old man told her that the curer was away for the day, treating a patient. The man seemed to be very well informed about the curer's activities, and Florinda found it easy to talk to him. He was solicitous, and he confided that he was a patient himself. He described his disease as an incurable condition that made him oblivious to the world. They chatted amicably until late. The old man was so helpful that he even gave Florinda his bed so she could rest and wait until the next day when the cure would return. In the morning, Florinda said that she was suddenly awakened by a sharp pain in her leg. A woman was moving her leg, pressing it with a piece of shiny wood. The cure was a very pretty woman, Florinda went on. She took a look at my leg and shook her head. "I know who has done this to you," she said. "He must have been handsomely paid, or he must have surmised that you are a useless human being. Which do you think it was?" Florinda laughed. She said that she thought the cure was either crazy or was being rude. She had no conception that anyone in the world could possibly believe that she was a useless human being. Even though she was in excruciating pain, she let the woman know in so many words that she was a rich and worthy person and nobody's fool. Florinda recalled that the cure changed her attitude on the spot. She seemed to have gotten scared. She respectfully addressed her as Missy and got up from her chair and ordered everyone out of the room. When they were alone, the cure sat on Florinda's chest and pushed her head backward over the edge of the bed. Florinda said that she fought her. She thought that she was going to be killed. She tried to scream, to alert her servants, but the cure quickly covered her head with a blanket and plugged her nose. Florinda gasped for air and had to breathe through her open mouth. The more the cure pressed on Florinda's chest, and the tighter she plugged her nose, the wider Florinda opened her mouth. When she realized what the cure was really doing, she had already drunk the foul liquid contents of a large bottle, which the cure had put into her open mouth. Florinda commented that the cure had maneuvered her so well that she did not even choke, in spite of the fact that her head was dangling over the side of the bed. "I drank so much liquid that I was about to get sick," Florinda continued. "She made me sit up and looked right into my eyes without blinking. I wanted to put my finger down my throat and vomit. She slapped me until my lips bled. An Indian slapping me, drawing blood from my lips. Neither my father nor my mother had ever laid a hand on me. My surprise was so great that I forgot the discomfort in my stomach. She called my men and told them to take me home. Then she leaned over and put her mouth to my ear so no one would hear. 'If you don't come back in 9 days, you asshole,' she whispered, 'you'll swell up like a toad and wish to God you were dead.'" Florinda said that the liquid had irritated her throat and vocal cords. She could not utter a word. This, however, was the least of her worries. When she arrived at her home, Celestino was waiting in a state of frenzy. Being incapable of speaking, Florinda was in the position to observe him. She noticed that his anger had nothing to do with worrying about her health, but with concern about his standing as a man of wealth and social status. He could not bear to be seen by his influential friends as resorting to Indian cures. He was raging, shouting that he was going to take his complaint to the army headquarters, have the soldiers capture the woman cure, and bring her to town to be thrashed and thrown in jail. These were not just empty threats. He actually pressed a military commander to send a patrol after the cure. The soldiers came back a few days later with the news that the woman had fled. Florinda was put at ease by her maid, who assured her that the cure would be waiting for her if she cared to go back. Although the inflammation of her throat persisted to the point that she could not eat solid food and could barely swallow liquids, Florinda could hardly wait for the day when she was supposed to go back to see the cure. The medicine had eased the pain in her leg. When she let Celestino know her intentions, he became furious enough to round up some help in order to put an end to the nonsense himself. He and 3 of his trusted men went on horseback ahead of her. Florinda said that when she arrived at the cure's house, she expected to find her perhaps dead. But instead, she found Celestino sitting alone. He had sent his men to 3 different places in the vicinity with orders to bring back the cure by force if necessary. Florinda saw the same old man she had met before. He was trying to calm her husband down, assuring him that any one of his men would be back shortly with the woman. As soon as Florinda was placed on a cot in the front porch, the cure stepped out of the house. She began to insult Celestino, calling him names, yelling obscenities at him, until she got him so angry that he rushed to strike her. The old man held him back and begged him not to hit her. He implored on his knees, pointing out that she was an old woman. Celestino was unmoved. He said that he was going to horsewhip her, regardless of her age. He advanced to grab her, but was stopped cold. 6 awesome-looking men came out from behind the bushes, wielding their machetes. Florinda said that fear froze Celestino to the spot. He was ashen. The cure came to him and told him that either he would meekly let her whip him on the buttocks, or her helpers would hack him to pieces. As proud a man as he was, he bent over meekly to be whipped. The curer had reduced him in a few moments to a helpless man. She laughed in his face. She knew that he was pinned down, and she let him sink. He had walked into her trap. Like the careless fool that he was, drunk with his own inflated ideas about his worth. Florinda looked at me and smiled. She was quiet for a while. The first principle of the art of stalking is that warriors choose their battleground, she said. A warrior never goes into battle without knowing what the surroundings are. The woman curer had shown me, through her battle with Celestino, the first principle of stalking. Then she came over to where I was lying down. I was crying. That was the only thing I could do. She seemed concerned. She tucked my blanket around my shoulders and smiled and winked at me. "The deal is still on, asshole," she said. "Come back as soon as you can if you want to live. But don't bring your master with you, you little whore. Come only with those who are absolutely necessary." Florinda fixed her eyes on me for a moment. From her silence, I surmised that she wanted my comments. To discard everything that is unnecessary is the second principle of the art of stalking, she said, without giving me time to say anything. Her account had absorbed me so intensely that I had not noticed that the wall of fog had disappeared, or when. I simply realized that it was not there anymore. Florinda got up from her chair and led me to the door. We stood there for a while, as we had done at the end of our first meeting. Florinda said that Celestino's anger had also permitted the cure to point out, not to her reason, but to her body, the first 3 precepts of the rule for stalkers. Although her mind was focused entirely on herself, since nothing else existed for her outside her physical pain and the anguish of losing her beauty, still, her body had acknowledged what had happened and needed later on only a reminder in order to put everything in place. Warriors don't have the world to cushion them, so they must have the rule, she went on. Yet the rule of stalkers applies to everyone. Celestino's arrogance was his undoing and the beginning of my instruction and liberation. His self-importance, which was also mine, forced us both to believe that we were above practically everybody. The cure brought us down to what we really are: nothing. The first precept of the rule is that everything that surrounds us is an unfathomable mystery. The second precept of the rule is that we must try to unravel these mysteries, but without ever hoping to accomplish this. The third, that a warrior, aware of the unfathomable mystery that surrounds him, and aware of his duty to try to unravel it, takes his rightful place among mysteries and regards himself as one. Consequently, for a warrior, there is no end to the mystery of being, whether being means being a pebble or an ant or oneself. That is a warrior's humbleness. One is equal to everything. There was a long and forced silence. Florinda smiled, playing with the tip of her long braid. She said that I had had enough. The third time I went to see Florinda, Don Juan did not leave me at the door, but walked in with me. All the members of his party were congregated in the house, and they greeted me as if I were returning home from a long trip. It was an exquisite event. It integrated Florinda with the rest of them in my feelings since that was the first time she had joined them while I was present. The next time I went to Florinda's house, Don Juan unexpectedly shoved me as he had done before. My shock was immense. Florinda was waiting for me in the hall. I had entered instantly into the state where the wall of fog is visible. I've told you how the principles of the art of stalking were shown to me, she said as soon as we sat down on the couch in her living room. Now you must do the same for me. How did the Nahual Juan Matish show them to you? I told her that I could not remember offhand. I had to think about it, and I could not think. My body was frightened. Don't complicate things, she said in a tone of command. Aim at being simple. Apply all the concentration you have to decide whether or not to enter into battle. For any battle is a battle for one's life. This is the third principle of the art of stalking. A warrior must be willing and ready to make his last stand here and now, but not in a helter-skelter way. I simply could not organize my thoughts. I stretched my legs and lay down on the couch. I took deep breaths to relax my midsection, which seemed to be tied in knots. Good, Florinda said. I see that you're applying the fourth principle of the art of stalking. Relax. Abandon yourself. Fear nothing. Only then will the powers that guide us open the road and aid us. Only then. I struggled to remember how Don Juan had shown me the principles of the art of stalking. For some inexplicable reason, my mind refused to focus on my past experience. Don Juan was so vague a memory. I stood up and began to look around. The room we were in was exquisitely arranged. The floor was made of large, buff-colored tiles. Excellent craftsmanship had been involved in laying it. I was about to examine the furniture. I moved toward a beautiful dark brown table. Florinda jumped to my side and shook me vigorously. You've correctly applied the fifth principle of the art of stalking, she said. Don't let yourself wander away. What is the fifth principle? I asked. When faced with odds that cannot be dealt with, warriors retreat for a moment, she said. They let their minds meander. They occupy their time with something else. Anything would do. You've done just that. But now that you've accomplished it, you must apply the sixth principle. Warriors compress time. Even an instant counts. In a battle for your life, a second is an eternity that may decide the outcome. Warriors aim at succeeding, therefore they compress time. Warriors don't waste an instant. All of a sudden, a bulk of memories erupted into my awareness. I excitedly told Florinda that I could certainly remember the first time Don Juan had acquainted me with those principles. Florinda put her fingers to her lips in a gesture that demanded my silence. She said that she had only been interested in bringing me face to face with the principals, but she did not want me to relate those experiences to her. Florinda went on with her story. She said that as the cure was telling her to come back without Celestino, she had her drink a concoction that alleviated her pain almost instantly. And she also whispered in her ear that she, Florinda, had to make a momentous decision by herself. That she should put her mind at ease by doing something else, but that she should not waste a moment once she had reached her decision. At home, she stated her desire to go back. Celestino did not see any point in objecting, because her conviction was unshakable. Almost immediately, I went back to see the cure, Florinda continued. This time, we went on horseback. I took my most trusted servants with me, the girl who had given me the poison, and a man to handle the horses. We had a rough time going over those mountains. The horses were very nervous because of the stench of my leg, but we somehow made it. Without knowing, I had used the third principle of the art of stalking. I had put my life, or what was left of it, on the line. I was dying anyway. It is a fact that when one is half dead, as in my case, not with great pain, but with great discomfort, the tendency is to get so lazy and weak that no effort is possible. I stayed at the cure's house for 6 days. By the second day, I felt better already. The swelling went down. The oozing from the leg had stopped. There was no more pain. I was just a little weak and wobbly in the knees when I tried to walk. During the 6th day, the cure took me to her room. She was very careful with me, and, showing me every consideration, made me sit on her bed and gave me coffee. She sat on the floor at my feet, facing me. I can remember her exact words. "You are very, very sick, and only I can cure you," she said. "If I don't, you'll die a death that is not to be believed. Since you're an imbecile, you'll last to the bitter end. On the other hand, I could cure you in 1 day, but I won't. You will have to keep coming here until you have understood what I have to show you. Only then will I cure you completely. Otherwise, being the imbecile you are, you will never come back." Florinda said that the cure, with great patience, explained to her the very delicate points of her decision to help her. She did not understand a word of it. The explanation made her believe more than ever that the cure was a bit touched in the head. When the cure realized she was not getting through to Florinda, she became more stern and made her repeat over and over, as if Florinda were a child, that without the cure's help, her life was finished, and that the cure could choose to cancel the cure and leave her hopelessly to die. Finally, the woman lost her patience when Florinda begged her to finish healing her and send her home to her family. She picked up a bottle containing the medicine and smashed it on the ground and told Florinda that she was through with her. Florinda said that she cried then, the only real tears of her life. She told the curer that all she wanted was to be cured and that she was more than willing to pay for it. The woman said it was too late for monetary payment, that what she wanted from Florinda was her attention, not her money. Florinda admitted to me that she had learned during the course of her life how to get anything she wanted. She knew how to be obstinate, and she raised the point that there must have been thousands of patients that had come to the cure, half dead, just like herself, and that the curer took their money. Why was her case different? The curer's reply, which was no explanation at all for Florinda, was that being a seer, she had seen Florinda's luminous body, and she and the curer were exactly alike. Florinda thought that the woman had to be mad not to realize that there was a world of difference between them. The curer was a rude Indian, uneducated and primitive, while Florinda was rich and beautiful and white. Florinda asked the woman what she was planning to do to her. The curer told her that she had been commissioned to heal her and then teach her something of great importance. Florinda wanted to know who had commissioned her. The woman replied that it was the eagle, a reply which convinced Florinda that the woman was absolutely crazy. And yet Florinda saw no alternative to complying with the woman's demands. She told her that she was willing to do anything. The woman changed her belligerent attitude instantly. She gave Florinda some medicine to take home and told her to come back as soon as she could. As you yourself know, Florinda went on, a teacher must trick the disciple. She tricked me with my cure. She was right. I was such an idiot that if she had cured me right away, I would have gone back to my stupid life, as if nothing had ever happened to me. Don't we all do that? Florinda returned the following week. Upon arriving, she was greeted by the old man she had met before. He talked to her as if they were the best of friends. He said that the curer had been away for several days and would not come back for several more, and that she had entrusted him with some medicine for her in case she showed up. He told Florinda in a very friendly but commanding tone that the curer's absence had left her with only two alternatives. She could either go back home, possibly in worse physical shape than before due to the strenuous trip, or she could follow the curer's carefully outlined instructions. He added that if she decided to stay and start her treatment right away, in 3 to 4 months she would be as good as new. There was, however, one stipulation. If she decided to stay, she had to remain in the curer's house for 8 consecutive days and had, perforce, to send her servants home. Florinda said that there was nothing to decide, that she had to stay. The old man immediately gave her the potion that the curer had apparently left for her. He sat up with her most of the night. He was reassuring, and his easy talk kindled Florinda's optimism and confidence. Her 2 servants left the next morning after breakfast. Florinda was not at all afraid. She trusted the old man implicitly. He told her that he had to build a box for her treatment in accordance with the cure's instructions. He made her sit on a low chair, which had been placed in the center of a circular area with no vegetation on it. While she was seated there, the old man introduced her to 3 young men he said were his assistants. 2 were Indians, and 1 was white. It took the 4 of them less than an hour to construct a crate around the chair where Florinda was sitting. When they were finished, Florinda was encased snugly inside a crate, which had a lattice top to allow for ventilation. One of its sides was hinged in order to serve as a door. The old man opened the door and helped Florinda to step out of it. He took her to the house and asked her to help him prepare her medicine, in order to have it handy for the time when the cure would return. Florinda was fascinated with the way he worked. He made a potion out of plants with a pungent odor and prepared a bucket of hot liquid. He suggested that for her comfort, she should immerse her leg in the bucket, and if she felt like it, she should drink the concoction he had prepared before it lost its potency. Florinda obeyed him unquestioningly. The relief she felt was remarkable. The old man then assigned her a room to herself and had the young men put the crate inside the room. He told her that it might be days before the cure would show up. In the meantime, she had to follow meticulously all the instructions left for her. She agreed with him, and he produced a list of tasks. They included a great deal of walking in order to collect the medicinal plants needed for her potions, and her assistance in their actual preparation. Florinda said that she spent 12 days there instead of 8, because her servants were late due to torrential rains. It was not until the 10th day that she discovered that the woman had never left, and that the old man was actually the real cure. Florinda laughed, describing her shock. The old man had tricked her into actively participating in her own cure. Furthermore, under the pretext that the cure demanded it, he put her inside the crate daily for at least 6 hours, in order to fulfill a specific task he had called the recapitulation. At that point in her account, Florinda scrutinized me and concluded that I had had enough and that it was time for me to leave. Our next meeting, she explained that the old man was her benefactor, and that she was the first stalker that the woman of her benefactor's party had found for the Nahual Juan Matus. But none of that was known to her then. Even though her benefactor made her shift levels of awareness and revealed this to her, it was to no avail. She had been raised to be beautiful, and that had created a shield around her, so impenetrable that she was impervious to change. Her benefactor concluded that she needed time. He devised a plan to draw Celestino to Florinda's battleground. He made her see things about Celestino's personality that she herself knew to be true, but had not had the courage to face on her own. Celestino was very possessive of everything he owned. His wealth and Florinda ranked high among his possessions. He had been forced to swallow his pride over his humiliation at the hands of the cure, because the cure was cheap and Florinda was actually recuperating. He was biding his time, waiting for a moment when the cure would be complete in order to seek revenge. Florinda said that her benefactor told her that the danger was that her complete recovery was going to be too quick, and Celestino would decide, since he made all the decisions in the house, that there was no longer any need for Florinda to see the cure. Her benefactor then gave her a potion to apply on her other leg. The unguent was terribly pungent and produced an irritation on the skin that resembled the spreading of the disease. Her benefactor advised her to use the unguent every time she wanted to come back to see him, even though she did not need a treatment. Florinda said that it took a year to be cured. In the course of that time, her benefactor acquainted her with the rule and drilled her like a soldier in the art of stalking. He made her apply the principles of stalking to the things she did daily. Small things at first, leading up to the major issues of her life. In the course of that year, her benefactor also introduced her to the Nahual Juan Matus, whom she described as very witty and thoughtful, but still the most unruly and terrifying young man she had ever met. She said that it was the Nahual Juan Matus who helped her escape from Celestino. He and Silvio Manuel smuggled her out of the city through police and army roadblocks. Celestino had filed a legal complaint for desertion, and being an influential man, he had used his resources to try to stop her from leaving him. Because of this, her benefactor had to move to another part of Mexico, and she had to remain in hiding in his house for years. This situation suited Florinda, as she had to fulfill the task of recapitulating, and for that she needed absolute quiet and solitude. She explained that a recapitulation is the forte of stalkers, as the dreaming body is the forte of dreamers. It consisted of recollecting one's life down to the most insignificant detail. Thus, her benefactor had given her that crate as a tool and a symbol. It was a tool that would permit her to learn concentration, for she would have to sit in there for years until all of her life had passed in front of her eyes. And it was a symbol of the narrow boundaries of our person. Her benefactor told her that whenever she had finished her recapitulation, she would break the crate to symbolize that she no longer abided by the limitations of her person. She said that stalkers use crates or earth coffins in order to seal themselves in while they are reliving, more than merely recollecting, every moment of their lives. The reason why stalkers must recapitulate their lives in such a thorough manner is that the eagle's gift to man includes its willingness to accept a surrogate instead of genuine awareness. If such a surrogate to be a perfect replica. Florinda explained that since awareness is the eagle's food, the eagle can be satisfied with a perfect recapitulation in place of consciousness. Florinda gave me then the fundamentals of recapitulating. She said that the first stage is a brief recounting of all the incidents in our lives that, in an obvious manner, stand out for examination. The second stage is a more detailed recollection, which starts systematically at a point that could be the moment prior to the stalker sitting in the crate, and theoretically could extend to the moment of birth. She assured me that a perfect recapitulation could change a warrior as much, if not more, than the total control of the dreaming body. In this respect, dreaming and stalking led to the same end, the entering into the third attention. It was important for a warrior, however, to know and practice both. She said that for women, it took different configurations in the luminous body to master one or the other. Men, on the other hand, could do both with a degree of ease. Yet, they could never get to the level of proficiency that the women attained in each art. Florinda explained that the key element in recapitulating was breathing. Breath, for her, was magical because it was a life-giving function. She said that recollecting was easy if one could reduce the area of stimulation around the body. This was the reason for the crate. Then, breathing would foster deeper and deeper memories. Theoretically, stalkers have to remember every feeling that they have had in their lives. And this process begins with a breath. She warned me that the things she was teaching me were only preliminaries, that at a later time, in a different setting, she would teach me the intricacies. Florinda said that her benefactor directed her to write down a list of the events to be relived. He told her that the procedure starts with an initial breath. Stalkers begin with their chin on the right shoulder and slowly inhale as they move their head over a 180-degree arc. The breath terminates on the left shoulder. Once the inhalation ends, the head goes back to a relaxed position. They exhale, looking straight ahead. The stalker then takes the event at the top of the list and remains with it until all the feelings expended in it have been recounted. As stalkers remember the feelings they invested in whatever it is that they are remembering, they inhale slowly, moving their heads from the right shoulder to the left. The function of this breathing is to restore energy. Florinda claimed that the luminous body is constantly creating cobweb-like filaments, which are projected out of the luminous mass, propelled by emotions of any sort. Therefore, every situation of interaction, or every situation where feelings are involved, is potentially draining to the luminous body. By breathing from right to left while remembering a feeling, stalkers, through the magic of breathing, pick up the filaments they left behind. The next immediate breath is from left to right, and it is an exhalation. With it, stalkers eject filaments left in them by other luminous bodies involved in the event being recollected. She stated that these were the mandatory preliminaries of stalking, which all the members of her party went through as an introduction to the more demanding exercises of the art. Unless stalkers have gone through the preliminaries in order to retrieve the filaments they have left in the world, and particularly in order to reject those that others have left in them, there is no possibility of handling controlled folly, because those foreign filaments are the basis of one's limitless capacity for self-importance. In order to practice controlled folly, since it is not a way to fool or chastise people or feel superior to them, one has to be capable of laughing at oneself. Florinda said that one of the results of a detailed recapitulation is genuine laughter upon coming face to face with the boring repetition of one's self-esteem, which is at the core of all human interaction. Florinda emphasized that the rule defined stalking and dreaming as arts. Therefore, they are something that one performs. She said that the life-giving nature of breath is what also gives it its cleansing capacity. It is this capacity that makes a recapitulation into a practical matter. In our next meeting, Florinda summed up what she had called her last-minute instructions. She asserted that since the joint assessment of the Nahual Juan Matis and his party of warriors had been that I did not need to deal with the world of everyday life, they had taught me dreaming instead of stalking. She explained that this assessment had been radically modified and that they had found themselves in an awkward position. They did not have any more time to teach me stalking. She had to stay behind, on the periphery of the third attention, in order to fulfill her assignment at a later time when I would be ready. On the other hand, if I were to leave the world with them, she was exonerated from that responsibility. Florinda said that her benefactor considered the three basic techniques of stalking: the crate, the list of events to be recapitulated, and the stalker's breath, to be about the most important tasks a warrior can fulfill. Her benefactor thought that a profound recapitulation is the most expedient means to lose the human form. Thus, it is easier for stalkers, after recapitulating their lives, to make use of all the not doings of the self, such as erasing personal history, losing self-importance, breaking routines, and so forth. Florinda said that her benefactor gave all of them the example of what he meant. First, by acting out his premises, and then by giving them the warrior's rationales for his actions. In her own case, he, being a master of the art of stalking, acted out the ploy of her disease and cure, which not only was congruous with the warrior's way, but was a masterful introduction to the 7 basic principles of the art of stalking. He first drew Florinda to his own battleground, where she was at his mercy. He forced her to discard what was not essential. He taught her to put her life on the line with a decision. He taught her how to relax in order to help her regroup her resources. He made her enter into a new and different mood of optimism and self-confidence. He taught her to compress time. And finally, he showed her that a stalker never pushes himself to the front. Florinda was most impressed by the last principle. To her, it summarized everything she wanted to tell me in her last-minute instructions. My benefactor was the chief, Florinda said. And yet, looking at him, no one would ever believe it. He always had one of his female warriors as a front, while he freely mingled with the patients, pretending to be one of them. Or he posed as an old fool who was constantly sweeping dry leaves with a handmade broom. Florinda explained that in order to apply the 7th principle of the art of stalking, one has to apply the other 6. Thus, her benefactor was always looking on from behind the scenes. Thanks to that, he was capable of avoiding or parrying conflicts. If there was strife, it was never directed toward him, but toward his front, the female warrior. I hope that you have realized by now, she went on, that only a master stalker can be a master of controlled folly. Controlled folly doesn't mean to con people. It means, as my benefactor explained it, that warriors apply the 7 basic principles of the art of stalking to whatever they do, from the most trivial acts to life and death situations. Applying these principles brings about 3 results. The first is that stalkers learn never to take themselves seriously. They learn to laugh at themselves. If they're not afraid of being a fool, they can fool anyone. The second is that stalkers learn to have endless patience. Stalkers are never in a hurry. They never fret. And the third is that stalkers learn to have an endless capacity to improvise. Florinda stood up. We had been sitting as usual in her living room. I immediately assumed that our conversation was over. She said that there was one more topic to present to me before we said goodbye. She took me to another patio inside her house. I had never been in that part of her house before. She called someone softly, and a woman stepped out from her room. I did not recognize her at first. The woman called my name, and then I realized that she was Doña Soledad. Her change was stupendous. She was younger and more powerful. Florinda said that Soledad had been inside a recapitulating crate for 5 years, that the eagle had accepted her recapitulation in place of her awareness and had let her go free. Doña Soledad assented with a movement of her head. Florinda abruptly ended the meeting and told me that it was time for me to leave because I had no more energy. I went to Florinda's house many more times afterward. I saw her every time, but only for a few moments. She told me that she had decided not to instruct me anymore because it was to my advantage that I deal only with Doña Soledad. Doña Soledad and I met several times, but whatever took place during our meetings is something incomprehensible to me. Every time we were together, she would make me sit at the door of her room, facing the east. She would sit to my right, touching me. Then we would make the wall of fog stop rotating, and both of us would be left facing the south, into her room. I had already learned with La Gorda to stop the rotation of the wall. It seemed that Doña Soledad was helping me to realize another aspect of that perceptual capacity. I had correctly detected with La Gorda that only a portion of us stopped the wall. It was as if suddenly I had become divided in two. A portion of my total self was looking straight ahead and saw an immobile wall to my right, while another large portion of my total self had turned 90 degrees to the right and was staring at the wall. Every time Doña Soledad and I stopped the wall, we remained staring at it. We never entered into the area between the parallel lines, as the Nahual woman, La Gorda, and I had done scores of times. Doña Soledad would make me gaze every time into the fog, as if the fog were a reflective glass. I would experience then the most extravagant disassociation. It was as if I were racing at breakneck speed. I would see bits of a landscape forming in the fog, and suddenly I was in another physical reality. It was a mountainous area, rugged and inhospitable. Doña Soledad was always there in the company of a lovely woman who laughed uproariously at me. My incapacity to remember what we did beyond that point was even more acute than my incapacity to remember what the Nahual woman and La Gorda and I did in the area between the parallel lines. It seemed that Doña Soledad and I entered into another area of awareness that was unknown to me. I was already in what I thought was my keenest state of consciousness, and yet there was something even keener. The aspect of the second attention that Doña Soledad was obviously showing me was more complex and more inaccessible than anything I had witnessed so far. All I could recollect was a sense of having moved a great deal, a physical sensation comparable to having walked for miles, or to having hiked on rugged mountain trails. I also had a clear bodily certainty, although I could not fathom why, that Doña Soledad, the woman, and I exchanged words, thoughts, feelings, but I could not pinpoint them. After every meeting with Doña Soledad, Florinda would immediately make me leave. Doña Soledad gave minimal verbal feedback. It appeared to me that being in a state of such heightened awareness affected her so profoundly she could hardly talk. There was something that we were seeing in that rugged landscape besides the lovely woman, or something we were doing together that left us breathless. She could not remember anything, although she tried. I asked Florinda to clarify the nature of my journeys with Doña Soledad. She said that a part of her last-minute instruction was to make me enter into the second attention, as stalkers do, and that Doña Soledad was more capable than she herself was to usher me into the stalker's dimension. On the meeting that was to be our last, Florinda, as she had done at the beginning of our instruction, was waiting for me in the hall. She took my arm and led me to the living room. We sat down. She warned me not to try as yet to make sense of my journeys with Doña Soledad. She explained that stalkers are inherently different than dreamers in the way they use the world around them, and that what Doña Soledad was doing was trying to help me to turn my head. When Don Juan had described the concept of turning a warrior's head to face a new direction, I had understood it as a metaphor that depicted a change in attitude. Florinda said that that description was true, but it was no metaphor. It was true that stalkers turn their heads. However, they do not turn them to face a new direction, but to face time in a different way. Stalkers face the oncoming time. Normally, we face time as it recedes from us. Only stalkers can change that and face time as it advances on them. Florinda explained that turning the head did not mean that one sees into the future, but that one sees time as something concrete, yet incomprehensible. It was superfluous, therefore, for me to try to think out whatever Doña Soledad and I were doing. All of it would make sense when I could perceive the totality of myself, and would then have the energy necessary to unravel that mystery. Florinda told me, in the spirit of someone giving a bonus, that Doña Soledad was a supreme stalker. She called her the greatest of them all. She said that Doña Soledad could cross the parallel lines any time. Furthermore, none of the warriors of Don Juan Matas' party had been able to do what she had done. Doña Soledad, through her impeccable stalking techniques, had found her parallel being. Florinda explained that whatever I had experienced with Nahual Juan Matas, or Silvio Manuel, or Gennaro, or Zuleika, were only minute portions of the second attention. Whatever Doña Soledad was helping me witness was still another minute but different portion. Doña Soledad had not only made me face the oncoming time, but she had taken me to her parallel being. Florinda defined the parallel being as the counterbalance that all living creatures have by the fact that they are luminous beings filled with inexplicable energy. A parallel being of any person is another person of the same sex who is intimately and inextricably joined to the first one. They coexist in the world at the same time. The two parallel beings are like the two ends of the same pole. It is nearly impossible for warriors to find their parallel being because there are too many distracting factors in the life of a warrior, other priorities. But whoever is capable of accomplishing this feat would find in his parallel being, just as Doña Soledad had, an endless source of youth and energy. Florinda stood up abruptly and took me to Doña Soledad's room. Perhaps because I knew that it was going to be our last meeting, I was taken aback by a strange anxiety. Doña Soledad smiled at me when I told her what Florinda had just told me. She said, with what I thought to be a true warrior's humbleness, that she was not teaching me anything, that all she had aspired to do was to show me her parallel being, because that would be where she would retreat when the Nahual Juan Matas and his warriors left the world. However, something else happened which was beyond her understanding. Florinda had explained to her that we had boosted each other's energy, and that had made us face the oncoming time, not in small doses, as Florinda would have liked us to, but in incomprehensible gobbles, as my unruly nature wanted it. The result of our last meeting was even more baffling. Doña Soledad, her parallel being, and I remained for what I felt was an extraordinary long time together. I saw every feature of the parallel being's face. I felt she was trying to tell me who she was. She also seemed to be cognizant that this was our last meeting. There was such an overpowering sense of frailty in her eyes. Then, a wind-like force blew us away into something that held no meaning for me. Florinda suddenly helped me to stand up. She took me by the arm and led me to the door. Doña Soledad walked with us. Florinda said that I would have a hard time remembering all that had transpired because I was indulging in my rationality, a condition that could only worsen because they were about to leave and I would have no one to help me to shift levels of awareness. She added that someday Doña Soledad and I would meet again in the world of everyday life. It was then that I turned to Doña Soledad and begged her to drive me out of my indulging. I told her that if she failed, she should kill me. I did not want to live in the meagerness of my rationality. It's wrong to say that, Florinda said. We're warriors, and warriors have only one thing in mind: their freedom. To die and be eaten by the eagle is no challenge. On the other hand, to sneak around the eagle and be free is the ultimate audacity.